The Hillsborough victims were unlawfully killed. Extraordinary scenes as the families of those who died get the justice they've fought for nearly 3 decades. After the longest inquest in British history, the jury decides the fans were not to blame. They died because of police failings and were let down by the ambulance service.
What we've tried to do for 27 years is to bring justice for those who never went home.
I'm just glad that the truth's out there now and we can hopefully try and get on with our lives.
I'm live in Liverpool tonight with all the reaction on this historic day.
Also on the programme, one other major story this evening. Junior doctors walk out of emergency care in the strike over contracts. The Health Secretary says the government will not back down.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin in Liverpool and Mary Nightingale in the studio.
Good evening from Liverpool, where 2 words dominate the city square tonight. The truth has finally emerged and justice has at last been done. Inquests have found that the 96 victims of the Hillsborough disaster were unlawfully killed. The senior police officer on duty was responsible for manslaughter by gross negligence. The fans themselves were exonerated. For their families, it is quite simply a monumentous day. To begin our coverage tonight, Neil Connery reports on the scenes at the end of a 27-year battle.
For 27 years, they fought for justice. For those they loved who never returned from Hillsborough. Their relief when the inquest found the 96 Liverpool fans who died that day were unlawfully killed was overwhelming.
I'm just glad that the truth's out there now and we can hopefully try and get on with our lives. I'm just sorry it took 27 years, because if it would have happened 27 years ago, it might not have wrecked as many lives and families that it has done.
What was your little group like when they announced those verdicts?
We just started crying and sobbed the whole way through. We didn't stop crying until it ended.
And then an impromptu rendition of Liverpool FC's anthem, You'll Never Walk Alone.
We've been travelling down this road for 27 years. We've had many, many kickbacks, but today we gained the confidence from the jury that what we've tried to do for 27 years is to bring justice for those who never went home.
For the victims' families, the jury's conclusions vindicated their tireless campaign by finding those in charge at Hillsborough were criminally negligent and that the fans bore no blame. The Hillsborough disaster unfolded during Liverpool's FA Cup tie against Nottingham Forest in April 1989, as hundreds of fans were crushed at Sheffield Wednesday's ground. An order was given by the match commander, Chief Superintendent David Duckenfield, to open an exit gate at the Leppings Lane end. 2,000 fans flooded into the already packed central pens behind the goal. Claims the fans were to blame were contested from the start.
There's been no violence as far as the Liverpool fans are concerned. They simply said they got the wrong end of the ground, that there were too many people given tickets for that end of the ground.
Today, South Yorkshire's Chief Constable said the force got the policing catastrophically wrong.
That day, 96 people died and the lives of many others were changed forever. The force failed the victims and failed their families. Today, as I have said before, I want to apologise unreservedly to the families and those affected.
Justice for the 96, justice
for the families of those unlawfully killed at Hillsborough. It's been the longest of roads, a day of high emotion in which the truth about that day was finally settled. Neil Connery, ITV News.
And our correspondent Paul Davis joins us from outside the Coroner's Court in Warrington. Extraordinary scenes there, Paul. What was the atmosphere like in court when the jury delivered their conclusions?
Well, the atmosphere was like nothing I've ever experienced in many, many years of court reporting. Mark, you could feel the tension beforehand. You could feel those 27 years of painfully fighting the system. But when the jury foreman answered yes to that crucial question, the question, were the 96 unlawfully killed? Well, that tension broke. Around me, dozens of families started to cry all at once. There were people shouting loudly, "Alleluia," and at last. And it continued, particularly when the jury determined that the fans had played no part in the disaster. The coroner, well, he just allowed the families their time. He clearly made that a decision. And when the jury foreman finally sat down, all of the families rose as one and applauded. Quite amazing scenes, and as I say, like nothing I've ever witnessed before.
All right, Paul, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, the events leading up to the tragedy were captured on cameras in and around the stadium. The footage shows how officers on duty quickly became overwhelmed and how delays and fatal mistakes by the police played a big part in the unfolding tragedy.
It was a normal build-up to a big game. Just under half an hour to the kick-off and already they're tightly packed at the turnstile entrance to the Leppings Lane terrace. CCTV footage being monitored by police that day gives an idea of how the crowd outside was growing by the minute. And already inside, the two centre pens of the terrace were packed, though the atmosphere largely jovial. But outside at 2:40, as a boy is lifted clear from the crush, the first real sign that things were going badly wrong. The police officer in charge outside the ground, Superintendent Roger Marshall, is clearly worried. He later said he feared fatalities could occur. Inside, there was plenty of room in the pens at either end of the terrace, but most people headed straight for the already jammed centre pens. At 2:52, with thousands of fans still outside, police took the decision to open the exit gate. Over the next 5 minutes, 2,000 fans streamed through, and again most followed a natural path to the centre pens.
And the match is on with Liverpool in red playing from...
Within minutes of the kick-off, it was clear something was wrong on the fence terracing behind the Liverpool goal. At first, police appeared to believe it was some sort of pitch invasion, but soon people were collapsing on both sides of the fence. At 6 minutes past 3, police ordered the players off. But there were still indications they'd not grasped the scale of the tragedy unfolding before their eyes. 2 ambulance officers walking off to get a stretcher. It was 6 minutes before they returned. But by then, scores of people had died or were dying. At the back as well as the front, supporters were trampled, others getting out however they could. The first ambulance arrives at pitchside at 16 minutes past 3. Help was coming, but it was desperate, it was basic, and it was largely makeshift. And for 96 football fans, it was all too little, too late.
Well, if Liverpool fans hadn't been through enough that terrible day, they would soon find themselves blamed for the disaster. 4 days later, the Sun newspaper wrongly accused fans of hooliganism and falsely claimed some had picked the pockets of victims. The paper is still boycotted in Liverpool. Its then editor, Kelvin Mackenzie, gave his reaction to today's findings.
I absolutely agree with it. It's been an absolute disgrace what the police have done in South Yorkshire this last 27 years. I feel desperate for the families and the people, and I also feel that in some strange way, I got caught up in it. I feel terrible for them.
Strange way, you printed it on the front of your paper.
Of course I did. Everybody got sent this agency story. I printed it in that way. But honestly, the way it affected those families was a disgrace. I'm delighted for the families.
Well, the Prime Minister said today's findings made it clear the fans were completely blameless. But they also make a criminal prosecution of police officers much more likely. Currently, there are 2 investigations into possible crimes and the alleged cover-up. Both plan to send files to prosecutors by the end of this year. Emma Murphy looks at the next steps in the investigations.
96 lives, 27 years and not a single conviction, reprimand, docked pension or pay packet. Now the evidence that convinced the jury of unlawful killing will be passed to the Crown Prosecution Service and criminal charges may follow. Already some of those once responsible for upholding the law are being questioned under caution as suspects.
The principal offences that we're investigating are gross negligence, manslaughter, misconduct in a public office, and, of course, conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. Some of these are extremely serious criminal offences, but the fact of the matter is, just because somebody is elderly does not prevent them from having to accept responsibility for anything that they've done.
2 criminal inquiries are now underway. Operation Resolve is investigating if any criminal acts were committed in the run-up or on the day. The Independent Police Complaints Commission is investigating if any were committed in the days and years afterwards. Among those under scrutiny, Match Commander David Duckinfield, now judged to be so grossly negligent in his failure to protect fans that they were unlawfully killed. He's previously admitted failing to tell the truth about his actions. The ambulance service is also being investigated to see if it failed to respond appropriately in a way which cost lives. And Sheffield Wednesday and the FA are being looked into as there was no valid safety certificate or system to monitor how many fans are in the pens.
This is part of the archive for the 2 investigations. 500,000 pages stored in 1,100 boxes, detailing the lives and the deaths of 96 people and the actions of those who were meant to keep them safe. Over the past 3 years, 400 people have worked through these documents, seeking to build criminal cases against those they suspect may be responsible.
The IPCC is investigating any possible cover-up, who changed 260 police statements and why. At the inquest, officers such as Norman Bettison, who would become Chief Constable of Merseyside, denied being part of an operation to change statements. The IPCC will also consider why misleading information was passed to the then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher during a visit the following day, and why, within hours, the Police Federation and others were publicly blaming the fans.
The police certainly aren't to blame. When this mob surged through, the police officers would have been trampled to death underneath it.
Today, the Police Federation refused to apologise for such comments.
It is not my place to apologise on what my predecessors may or may not have done. What I can say is that we will support the investigation further and support officers and our ex-members at the same time.
Deborah Martin was a police officer at the match that day.
Hillsborough broke me, but the police destroyed me.
She says she was bullied into changing her statement by a policewoman who repeatedly visited her home.
By the time she'd visited me on the third time, it was pure aggression. And all the time that she'd been talking to me, she had a briefcase with her and she'd already got her, what as I put down as the fake statement. It was already printed out.
So these words, I felt like a zombie as a result of this. I feel like my memory, my recollection of that day is possibly inaccurate.
No, I didn't. They're not my words, and that is not my original statement. That is a false statement.
Deborah Martin is one of 13,000 witnesses who've now made statements to the £80 million inquiries. They will be complete by the end of the year, and then it will be down to the Crown Prosecution Service to decide who should face criminal charges over Hillsborough.
The 96 white seats behind me represent the 96 lives that were lost here. And as those individuals were dying in the pens, it is now clear that the lies and ill truths were being told about them. It has taken all these years to get to this point, and it is likely that in the years to come, what happened here will be revisited in criminal courts.
Emma, thank you very much. Well, that's it from here for now. We'll be back in Liverpool a little later in the programme. Coming up next, Mary will have the very latest on the day's other big story, the junior doctors' strike. That's right after the break.
And welcome back. Hospitals say they have been coping well with the NHS's first all-out strike by junior doctors in England. Nearly 80% of junior medics didn't turn up for work today, including withdrawal of emergency care. The Prime Minister said doctors were wrong to go ahead with the strike. Our health editor, Rachel Younger, has more.
No one thought it would come to this. But today, in every corner of England, the unthinkable happened, as doctors normally on the front line of our hospitals joined the pickets instead.
We need an ECG.
Someone punched me below my elbow.
I keep this on for the next couple of days.
And if it looked at times like business as usual, it was far from it.
The two consultants here would normally be supported by 6 juniors, none of whom are in today. Instead, 4 consultants from other departments have been brought in, along with extra support staff.
It meant on a day billed as one not to be ill, glazer Paul Bell found his hand receiving the attention of a consultant with 25 years of experience.
You're very likely to be seen by a consultant in a very quick time and treated and discharged by that consultant rather than a junior doctor. So at present, I'd say it's probably one of the safest places to be.
For patients warned by the government their safety could be jeopardised, reality came as a pleasant surprise.
It's been brilliant. In fact, it's been one of the best days in hospital. I couldn't feel better cared for, actually.
Not so for the 20 patients whose operation this doctor had to cancel so he could cover his missing colleagues. A reservoir of support the hospital believes may wear thin.
I can't tell you how long we can rely on that goodwill to keep this organisation running as well as it is today.
But if many patients heeded advice to stay away, there was no sign of the bitter argument at the heart of all this budging an inch.
The concern here is that the total refusal of the BMA to negotiate on a perfectly straightforward matter of weekend pay and antisocial hours pay is, I think, sadly driven by some elements, not the majority, but some elements within the BMA who are looking at this as a political battle with the government instead of sitting around the table, negotiating, doing the right thing for patients.
So the Secretary of State is clearly running scared at the moment. The Secretary of State is announcing that this is a political struggle. They've been briefing the media over the last 24 hours that the BMA wants nothing more than to bring down the government. Completely ridiculous.
In other words, no one's ready to admit defeat. The junior doctors may be back at work tonight, but with another strike tomorrow, no one's winning here either. Rachel Younger, ITV News, Milton Keynes.
Well, our Deputy Political Editor Chris Shipp is with protesters in Whitehall. Now, Chris, there is still absolutely no sign of a resolution to this. What's going to happen next?
I think, Mary, if anyone was in any doubt at all about how bad relations have got between the two sides, you only really need to come to Whitehall this evening. We're actually standing on Whitehall outside the Department of Health. And about an hour after this strike finished, around 1,000 protesters gathered here shouting, "Where are you, Jeremy?" There was one stage, I think, during this dispute when people were wondering whether or not it would escalate as far as a strike in emergency wards. Now the talk is escalating further still. Much of that will, of course, depend on public opinion. You might hear behind me there are some buses and cars and taxis driving by tooting their support. But it should also be pointed out, they're not just junior doctors here. There's members of the RMT union, the National Union of Teachers, the PCS union and socialist workers. And to some extent that does play into Jeremy Hunt's hands. He was speaking to me earlier about this being a political strike. Some in government were even talking about it being akin to the miners' strike. I don't think that was particularly wise. But you do have to wonder now whether this whole thing can end with Jeremy Hunt still in his office here at the Department of Health.
Okay, Chris Shipp at Whitehall, thank you. Moving on to other news now. Scottish Power has been ordered to pay £18 million in fines for customer service failings linked to a new computer system. The energy regulator Ofgem said the firm failed to treat its customers fairly with inadequate call handling and billing. The clothing chain Austin Reed has entered administration, putting nearly 1,200 jobs at risk. It will continue trading while administrators try to sell all or part of the business. Sir Philip Green is to be called to appear before MPs over the collapse of his former company BHS. The committee is investigating a £571 million deficit in the firm's pension fund. And services have been held in Ukraine today to mark the 30th anniversary of the Chernobyl disaster. 31 people died in the immediate aftermath, but thousands more deaths have been linked to radiation caused by the world's worst nuclear accident. And that is it from me here. Now back to Mark in Liverpool.
Thanks, Mary. Well, one of the many family members at today's hearing was Barry Devonside. His teenage son, Chris, died at Hillsborough. During the inquest, Barry confronted match commander David Duckenfield over his failings, but he also blames himself for letting his son go to the match. Damon Green reports on a father's burden.
For 2 years, Barry Devonside came to court every morning with a burden he'd carried half his life. His son, Chris, died at Hillsborough, along with 2 friends who'd travelled with him. Barry had tried to stop Chris from going.
What I was trying to say to Chris, it's not safe, son. You went away. You came back. I asked again. I said no. And you came back a 3rd time. And I said yes, but I don't know why.
Fellow supporters carried Chris on a hoarding to the place they thought he would receive medical attention. It was already a makeshift morgue. There was only one body there in the distinctive Welsh rugby shirt Chris had worn to the match. Even then, Barry knew who was to blame.
Everybody knew the police had cocked up. There's no question about that. The only people who don't know they're cocked up are the South Yorkshire Police themselves.
And at the centre of the failures and the evasions, match commander David Duckenfield, the man Barry finally confronted at court.
I had no plans to approach him. I just want to speak to Mr. Duckenfield. Mr. Duckenfield, my name is Barry Devonside. Why have you kept my wife, my daughter, and all of the other families waiting 27 years to tell the truth? You know, he stepped up and he said, Mr. Devonside, I'm sorry. I just turned and walked away.
He's fought for the victims, the survivors, but for Barry the last 27 years have been about one person, his son.
We loved him. We absolutely adored him. Where Chris is concerned, there's no bias. He never, ever caused us a problem. It was a pleasure to be with. It was a pleasure to have around. I'm sorry.
The thoughts of one father on this historic day. It has taken 27 long years to get to the truth about what happened to these 96 people who went to a football match and never came home. The families have battled cover-ups, smears, delays and plain lies. They have done it with tenacity and great dignity. And today, finally, they won. From all of us here, goodbye.